All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. Today is Tuesday, which means it's Wheel of Time reread day, and we should be finishing up, hopefully.
And brought to you by Oikos. Please give me money.
Uh, so we left off on 722, because that was Rand waking up. And so we're gonna go through basically through the end of Rand's storyline with a little bit of crossover from
This
the
is why you
others.
don't send the wife to get your groceries. Oikos, I'm sorry. This is HEB. It is not as delicious as yours. Son of a. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
That's your own fault. Um, all right, so I'm trying to get my thoughts back in order. I had my brain all lined up as I went back over things to prep, and then work stupidity happened, and after dealing with that, my brain is all discombobulated. So, uh,
Well, we're getting to the good stuff. We should be able to finish it out today.
we are. So my first thought here, with Rand waking up is the interaction with Rand and Avienda. Because one of my nitpicks was I didn't feel like, Sexy Time in the Snow was set up very well, or as well as it could have and should have been. But uh their relationship after that does work very well. And I hadn't thought about this before until I was thinking about how to explain this. And we've talked about how the Rand's three women are different personality types in the same way that the three Tavra the three guys are different personality types, different archetypes as well. Um, Avienda is very much Rand. She is, Elaine and Min are very different types of people. There are some similarities there with Elaine and Rand, but Avienda is very much him in many ways.
Put a pin in that for spoilers because I came across some stuff
Okay.
talking about Elaine as Ileana.
Hmm.
We talked about that rabbit hole because Scott's convinced.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced. But the theory lands are full of lots of things, and there's one
Hmm.
specific to what exactly you just said right
Okay.
there. Yeah.
Well, uh, Avienda was so obstinately standoffish. Um, but when that wall was breached, giggity, um, it just came tumbling down because I don't want to get too much into this because this gets into Rand's character growth and his arc and his personality down the line, but you can already kind of see part of it that Rand is having to struggle with being hard versus being strong. And we've used that analogy before, because it came up very early on in one of my favorite scenes, the forging scene in The Dragon Reborn. And that's Avienda, and she's going to mirror Rand in a lot of ways. That that wall of I hate you, I want nothing to do with you because you're going to compromise my honor, that was very hard. So, I mean, there was no give there when Rand was constantly trying to extend an olive branch, but once it cracked, it just shattered. And now you see a very not a different Avienda because she's much more who she was when we saw her with Egwene. That hardness has collapsed. That bitterness is gone, and part of it is also something interesting about Avienda, but also about Aiel culture, which kind of says something about human nature in particular. You kind of touched on with the idea of how is it that you phrased it? Guilt versus um what's the word I'm looking for?
Shame.
Shame.
Yeah.
So Rand didn't really understand what she was saying before everything got, lizard brained. But we, the reader, have a clue because of we've seen Avienda talking about this a little more. I don't know that we've really seen her. I don't know that if we've had a point of view from her yet. But it is she wasn't going to run from it anymore, but that doesn't mean she doesn't recognize she has a price to pay.
Mm-hmm.
Because her honor has been compromised. And so you see that very quickly there in the aftermath, and then kind of again here that there's not going to be any cuddling or canoodling. It's, they did the deed, but they don't have a relationship, at least not yet. But at least now they can have a friendship. Because that element that was a wedge between them is now gone. And
Well, it
it's
wasn't
it's now
just a
something
wedge
she
between
has to
them, it
deal
was
with.
a
And
wedge between her and herself. Remember,
yes.
your problem was there was no buildup, and I was like, yes, there was all this buildup. It basically made it clear she was fighting this thing,
Hmm.
and now she doesn't have to fight it anymore because, well, there's nothing to fight.
Yeah.
In her mind, and this is partly cultural, but partly just her character in general. There, the fact that she had sex was not the thing.
Hmm.
The fact that she betrayed Elaine
Hmm.
was the thing. Well, you can only betray somebody once, realistically, until you've atoned for it. And so her mind has already switched to, well, it's done. What's done is done.
Hmm.
And so now I have to do this thing the right way. So I'm going to let
Right.
it, as we go forward, let Elaine decide the next step.
Yeah.
But having sex with him once and being his kind of semi partner as we go forward here in the recent history of these events, it's all one. It's not separate events. It's not, we did this, oh my gosh,
Hmm.
I'm guilty, I feel guilty, I'm never going to do it again. It's, well, here's the next step in the process.
Yeah.
I've got to find Elaine, and any further actions are still equivalent with the first. So
Yeah. So there's kind of a corollary to there are no solutions, only trade-offs. Everything has a price. So she took what
she's
she
already set the
wanted.
price.
She
Yeah.
took what she wanted, and now she's going to pay the price, and she fully accepts that. Um, so as much as I'm not high on the build-up, I do recognize that the after effect is done very well, where we see them kind of develop this relationship, but uh, because like you say, Avienda is going to do it the right way now. Um, that from the outside looking in, they do appear. You could see them as a couple, but it's all platonic because Avienda is not going to give into that anymore because it's all right. We did that. Get that out of my system. Now I'm going to do it the right way. Um,
Well, she also semi takes on a different role. She
yes,
she basically buries herself in the teacher role
yes,
instead of using the teacher role as a barrier. Now she's formed an identity from it.
yeah.
As you see from their first little spat here, she gets
Mhm.
extremely offended when he tries to make a joke in light of her trying to get him to adhere to Jaito.
Yes. Uh, and I think that's because since she has accepted her connection to him, then now she's more accepting of him as an Aiel, him as the Karakara, not him as this wetlander who's in this role, this wetlander who I hate because he's going to cause me to, you know, uh, breach my honor. Now, no, that he's still he still has so much to learn, but he has to learn it because he's one of us. Uh, I didn't have any other thoughts. I was going to, unless you had more on this, I was going to jump up to um when he gets up to the palace and greets the other high lords and ladies of Tyr and Karheen.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Um, so it occurred to me rereading this that uh the reason this scene plays out the way it does, is that Rand is acting out of character, but he wants to show off for one. He wants to show off his skills in the game. Here when he meets them all at the entrance to the palace, and he's being real clever and coy, and he's coldly nodding to some and enthusiastically greeting others, and everyone is thinking, okay, well, what does that mean?
Hmm.
And does he know that I know? Do I know that he knows that I know that I? And so he's got them off balance because they're all thinking he's scheming when really all he's doing is putting them off balance, and having them making sure they're looking at each other more than they're looking and scheming against him. Um, so he partly he wants to show off that he's learned enough, but also there's an element of wanting to uh prove prove to your teacher that you've done it, that you've learned the lessons. You know, you're, listen to me play this piece because I finally got it down. Look at my test score because, you know, I finally figured it out. Because of the change in Moraine's temperament, she's becoming something of a mentor to him, and he kind of acknowledges that as he's thinking about this, as he's preparing to do this little scheming. um and so I think there is also an element of wanting to show that I have learned these lessons that Maureen is trying to teach me. The problem is, and the reason Maureen is such a good character, uh, and why I think it was a mistake to make her the focal point and the heroine of the stupid, crappy series, is because she's a wonderfully flawed character.
Hmm.
Um, like all the Aes Sedai and the other people of power, is she's pretty narrow-minded. That she's trying to, go back to the beginning of the previous book when she was trying to get him to follow her scheme and basically start a war with Ilion. And then, you know, while uh, while the Amarillo and the White Tower were approaching the other leaders, then this would cement these people to you, and then the White Tower would bring in the others. She's trying to train him and teach him like he was born in the same place she was. You pointed out when we were talking about her last time that the game of houses is bred into her bones. She was
Hmm.
born into a very powerful Karhinian noble family. And so as soon as she could speak, she would have been picking up on this and being taught in these ways. That's not who he is.
Well,
So,
and the fact that she was way down the ladder is actually something she would have been expected to improve upon.
yeah.
Uh, Expected to be to improve upon, but also an advantage to her to be underestimated.
Hmm.
And so if she was not Aes Sedai, she was not born with the power, she would have been expected to use these skills to further her family name in
Yeah.
some way, and as a byproduct, further her own name.
Yeah. And I think the reason it is a little odd. And the reason, so on 747 is when he kind of is sick with himself about having done this. So his satisfaction slipped when he saw Asmodean's sardonic grin. Worse was Avienda's wondering stare. She had been in the Stone of Tears. She knew who these men were and why he had sent them here. I do what I must, he thought sourly, and wished it did not sound as if he were trying to excuse himself. This isn't who he is. And, just a little bit of a tease, not getting into the details. One of the annoying things about Rand's progression into assholery is that it goes on for so long, but it is very satisfying when he comes to when he achieves self-actualization, for lack of a better term, that he actually starts acting authentically, not who he's supposed to be as the Dragon Reborn, who is an emperor, which is what Moraine was trying to force him into, which is what he's trying to force himself into, because he sees that as his only way to deal with these, you know, high nobles who are scheming against him. And he's
What
desperately trying to forge these people together.
Well, and it's fun that Avienda is here in this, and she is part of his recognizing his out of character kind of motivation. And realistically, I want to add a wrinkle to this. We're saying out of character for him just because he felt bad, but it's not out of character for him because he knew to do it, and he did it without being told to do it. And so what we see with the girls in his life is, if that was Elaine standing there, she would have been proud of him.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see an interplay of what we talk about with Perrin and Fail's relationship as their complementary characters, but it's a much more simple dynamic. Where with Rand, he's got to be so many things to so many different people, so many different things to so many different people in so many different situations, as this supreme, basically savior of the world, that you can't fit a compliment into one person.
Mm-hmm.
And Avienda is a compliment here. This is way outside of Jaito, what he's doing right now, but it's way within Dies Damar. And
It
so,
is.
so she grounded him in that moment,
She's kind of
whereas
his.
Elaine would have
Yeah.
enabled him in that moment.
It's an interesting juxtaposition because, you know, in this in this dynamic, as you're laying it out, Elaine is his intellect. That he is a smart guy. He has picked up on these things as well as being taught. And so, as you say, it is in character in that he thinks to do it and he knows to do it and he knows how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all the intellect side. But
Avienda, people would think is his ferocity, but she's his honor.
she's his honor. And so
Mm-hmm.
what makes him disgusted is, and where I say it's out of character, is there's not a moment of, but is this what I really want to do? Is this the best way for me to do it? Not that this is a cunning move in the game of houses, but is that who I am and who I want to be? Is that who I want to portray? And, for anyone that's that this is a reread, you can kind of see that if you think about where Rand ends up in the last couple of books. All right. And that idea and that dynamic kind of carries through to the end of this chapter as he's sitting there taking their oaths of fealty and growing more and more annoyed, and everyone's looking scared because he's busy. He knows he has to do this, but he doesn't want to do this. So in his mind, he's running through the to-do list like you often do if you ever find yourself absent-minded while driving. It's probably because you're thinking of the crap you have to do when you get where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically what Rand's doing here. Except he's not thinking about, gotta go get the groceries, then gotta go pick up the kids, then gotta go. He's thinking, I gotta go murder this guy. So his His face is very different. Okay, and then we skip over the price of a ship because we've already posted that meme. Um,
Wait, what meme was that?
the I don't know why the prophet wanted a boat, but I doubt it was so you could sail downriver.
Oh,
Uh,
oh yeah.
Oopsie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Oh, that
let's see. All right, so skipping along, skipping along, skipping along. Okay. So then chapter 51 is when it gets back to Rand, and everything starts to come to a head. Um, he kind of does what he did at the front of the palace again, but in a different way. Um, with with the way he deals with the ladies trying to insinuate themselves into his inner circle by insinuating themselves into his pants. Um, and he kind of has the same reaction of, you know, that was clever, that hit the point home, that really got the message across, but I feel icky having done it. Um, and then we meet Lord Dobrain, who I think we meet very briefly once before, or at least his name in passing, I believe. Um, but now he becomes a real character, a pretty integral side character through, really the rest of the series, and one of my favorites. I think he's one of the better and more interesting um, side characters in large part because he's something of an oddball, uh, kind of like the Karhinen who end up following Matt in the band. Their Karhinenness kinds of falls away the more they're around Matt, and you kind of see the same thing with Dobrain in that the the upheaval of his country kind of broke him in a way, and so now he's very different from the other schemers, and you see that pretty quickly, and then it unfolds more and more in the next book especially. Um, let's see. And then the title of the chapter, News Comes to Karheen. The news comes to Karheen.
okay. So I was a little ahead of you. That's why I was confused.
Yeah. Um, so there's a bit more ammunition for you and Scott here on 857, starting at the very top there. Um, the interaction between Rand and Egwene. Um, it would have been a very simple thing and something Rand would have understood if Egwene was more interested in seeing Rand's point of view and understanding Rand the person rather than being wrapped up in her own journey. Because uh as Rand thinks here from Rand's perspective, that was what she had said 6 days ago. She was as much Aes Sedai as Moiraine, for all one wore Aiel garb and the other pale blue silk. Um I will not tell you what you do not need to know. She could have just told him it's not my secret to tell, which is
Hmm.
true. It's this is not my secret to tell. This is for others that when they're ready to reveal themselves to you, they will. And and if it's acceptable for me to do it, then I'll tell you.
Hmm.
That is something Rand would understand. He wouldn't necessarily like it, but he'd understand it.
Yeah, but communication is hard. We all know that.
Hmm.
And put the stakes as high as this is. I give both of them a pass here. He's frustrated.
Yeah.
She's young and really naive still, even
Yes.
though she's coming to a lot of things. She's still very naive. And, realistically, look at the way the women of the two rivers are taught to deal with men.
Hmm.
You know what you need to know. That's the wise ones. I mean, not the wise ones. The women's circle, uh, basically common answer to
Yeah,
everything.
except they're much more subtle at it because they don't tell you directly that that's what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But Egwene is still a novice at this, um, and she's trying to fill a role, trying to, in large part because she's got imposter syndrome, because she's literally an imposter. Imposter syndrome is generally when you feel like you don't belong. Well, she actually doesn't belong. She's only an accepted, posing as an Aes Sedai, and she knows it. But she has to try and portray that she actually is an Aes Sedai, but she doesn't know how to do that. She has not had the years of training and apprenticeship and everything that someone like Moiraine has,
Or
um,
just age.
or just age.
Yeah. Dealing
But
with people in general.
as Rand says, he has every reason to be annoyed here. Um, just give me the driblets you're willing to dole out, and let me worry whether what you don't care to tell me will stab me in the night. Because as you said earlier, he has to be many things to many people, and he's got a lot of things he's juggling up in the air.
Mhm.
And I could never even juggle two or three. I could never juggle the single ball in one hand is about all I could do. Uh, and then the letters. Okay. Um, and the two letters themselves. As Rand mutters after reading the first one, she doesn't even ask. You learn a lot about Elida that we kind of knew from what little bit we've seen her so far, and is going to get really hammered uh, in subsequent books when we actually start to see her and get points of view from her.
No, I
Um,
one you're jumping ahead to a big thing, but I like
yeah.
subtle little things.
Mm,
And when Moiraine hands him the letters, her last statement is, "There are no poison needles in the seals and
yeah,
no
yeah.
traps woven." And he has a moment in his head he had not thought of either. That's a small little blip that we almost just kind of phased over, but
Mm,
it is a moment of realization in his head that I need to learn. And it should have been a moment of, this is why I need these people.
yeah.
Because Moiraine, being well versed in Dies Damar, that was her first thought. To him, it would have been his thought after he had a poison needle in his finger.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for a practical real world example of what we're talking about here, go watch our last episode, where we talk about martial arts and Bruce Lee's philosophy of,
Mm-hmm.
you know, uh, learn what you can, wait, take what is useful, discard what is not, add what is specifically your own. So, the idea that there is always something to learn, even if what you learn is, yeah, that's not good, that doesn't work for me, whatever, that was a waste of time, don't do that again. So there's a reason why in both Eastern and Western philosophy, and I think this is something very interesting that's often lost and says something universal about humanity, in both the Greek-based, European philosophy and the Chinese-based Eastern philosophy. The true mark of wisdom is knowing how little you know.
Mm-hmm.
That is a sentiment repeated across many philosophical disciplines.
Well,
And
it's Socrates, which I think is misquoted personally, but
it
the thing I know is that
yes,
I know nothing. But I think it also is translated to what I do know is I have much to learn. There's a big difference between those two statements, but
yes, yeah, it's yeah. One is a little more philosophical, and one is, was Socrates really that snarky?
no, well, one is people's cop out to
Mm,
having, to
mhm.
actually figure things out, but
Yes, yeah. It, if Socrates said it the first way, it almost certainly wasn't a cop out.
Mhm.
Uh, so good point that he thinks he's so clever, and this,
Well, and it's interesting timing too with what's about to happen.
yes,
Yeah.
and I have to feel like it's easy to read purpose because I believe there are literally millions of pages of notes.
Hmm.
Um, so there was a lot of planning here, and we just saw Rand the last time we saw Rand there. He was, look at me, I'm so clever, playing the game of houses, and Moraine is, as you point out, very subtly and simply, and something you can overlook, but just a little sentence saying, dude, you still have so much to learn. Don't
Hmm.
get a big head. Um,
Yeah, because she could have checked for those two things and not said anything.
mhm,
But she's very precise in pretty much everything she says. She didn't mistakenly say that to him. She knew he didn't think of it. This was a lesson for him.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, because uh hey, are you going to check for, that doesn't stick with you as much as, oh crap, I could have just killed myself,
Mm-hmm.
after you've already done it. So yeah,
Especially
again, reading
as she
purpose
said it
into it.
as he's about to pop the seal. Giggity.
Yep. Um, you kind of get the same thing here with Egwene, although Moraine doesn't give her a lesson, but I think Jordan is showing us that Egwene has a fair bit to learn still when you look at the uh really rather childish way she behaves here versus
Mm-hmm.
what Moraine does. Versus the way Moraine is teaching him lessons without overtly teaching him lessons, but driving points home in ways that he'll remember. A good thing you gave your oath, he said. The way you used to be, keeping everything back, I might have been ready to suspect you by now. A good thing you're more open now. She did not react. Well, she doesn't. What do you make of it? She must have heard about your swelled head, Egwene said softly. He did not think he had been meant to hear. Shaking her head, she said more loudly, this doesn't sound like Alviarin at all. It is her hand, Maureen said. What do you make of it, Rand? So Egwene being childish and needing to learn lessons, and Moraine is, no, you need to think. Stretch your brain. Don't just Google the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it and try and figure it out.
Well, and you have a slight moment where Avienda kind of, she's not really put in her place, but it's grudgingly is the right word he used there. Kind of, he's like, I'm not a fool. And then, but she's grudgingly, but she's very honest. But Egwene is, it puts Egwene in her place because
Hmm.
the middleman Avienda. If it was Rand saying it to Egwene, it would have just stiffened her back. But because there was a medium in between,
Hmm.
it was, well, no, he's actually not a fool, even though I keep saying it under my breath.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, and that's where um it, Avienda can get away or not get it's not that she gets away with it, is she can say things in a very similar way to Egwene, but because she's much more masculine, Rand takes it a very different way. In the same way, and we've talked about this before, about how brutally mean guys are to each other in their close friends circles. That women, when they are exposed to it, are just shocked by it, and we laugh.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes you cringe and groan because, oh, he got me good, but then you're thinking, all right, I need to get him back. And that's kind of the dynamic with Avienda and Rand, is that he understands where she's coming from. He understands that she's going to be brutally honest and direct. So when she says sometimes you're not a fool, she's not meaning it as an insult, because he knows she's going to say flat out when she thinks she's acting like a fool. But she's also going to acknowledge when he has done good, and she will acknowledge that as well. Egwene is coming from a much more combative place, so that he always feels like if she's critical, if she criticizes, she's being critical.
Mm-hmm.
And so he always feels like he has to instinctively push back rather than think about, well, does what she just said have merit?
I almost wonder if there's an inherent kind of uh, sub part of her that wishes things never changed, even though she's the one that's fighting so hard to embrace the change.
Mm.
That she should have been with Rand alone on a farm with their 2.5 kids and goats and dog and picket fence.
And her, the head of the household, and
Mm-hmm.
a pivotal part of the women's circle.
Yeah, she's almost overcompensating in the "I didn't want that, I never did," and
Mm.
I am woman, hear me roar. You know.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point, because you see it from the very moment they leave, when she gets so obstinate and angry at the idea, at the boys saying, no, you can't come.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you can't come because this isn't an adventure. This is dangerous. You can't keep up. You can't deal with the danger, blah, blah, blah. And and she gets immediately combative, and I'll show you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how she is through much of that first book, especially. And then, as we've talked about, you add on to that the trauma that she suffers in the second book,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really going to have an impact on her. Um, but
It's almost like she equates the life she would have had to the slavery she faced.
hmm,
You know, you want a feminism element to it. Well, Jordan was always ahead of his time.
that's a good point.
And you can see someone making that false equivalence in their head just to justify the further actions they take forward.
Well, yeah, and especially um like, if you ever suffer a physical trauma, you're going to be much more jittery about that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like
And
if you've
all
ever,
manifestations of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
you see this a lot, and you hear this a lot with, running backs and wide receivers who have serious knee or ankle injuries. All right, well, the physical part has been overcome, but there's a mental barrier they have to break through to trust that they can make these cuts, they can take these hits, they can go out and play the way they used to play. And
Shoot,
so,
you don't need a one running back or wide receiver. I did bench press today and I had to stop short of what I wanted to do because maybe hyper aware me was feeling something in my upper arm that I was like, oh, that might be near the attachment point of what I ripped.
Hmm. Hmm. And so anything that even remotely hints at the trauma she went through at the hands of the Shanshin is going to make her overreact. Um, which is why I like her arc, but we'll deal with that when we get there. Um, and
I
then
don't
just
think
her,
it's a like or dislike thing with me and
yeah,
Scott. I think it's a she justifies things that we don't think are justifiable because of that arc.
she is very often not a very good person.
Yeah.
Um, but I like how this wraps up, especially as you say, knowing what's about to happen. So
Mhm.
middle of 860, Moraine smiled. You learn quickly. You will do well. For a moment, she almost looked fond. Ouch!
Mhm.
You know, that's poignant just as it is, but on a reread, ooh, that stings
Yep.
because she knows. She absolutely knows what's about to happen.
Yeah. Well, and again, Moraine never does anything on accident. He thought she looked fond because she wanted him to know she was fond
Hmm.
of his approving of his behavior or knowledge at that point. So she's Mrs. Poker Face. Her and Lan are peas in a pod.
Mm.
And if Lan shows you appreciation, he knows it's actually not just true with him, but it's something you need to see at that moment. Moraine is exactly the same way.
That's a good point. I hadn't considered that too. She's making sure that Rand doesn't feel like, oh, and I never even got to say goodbye. You know, how many people feel like that when you find out that a grandparent's died and maybe it's been months since you've seen them and you know you knew they were sick, but you couldn't you kept thinking next week, next month, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and now I never even got to say goodbye. She's making sure he doesn't feel like that. It's he has no clue, but she's saying goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
And then poor Matt gets put in a vice.
Yeah, let's get through Matt because we just set up for the whole next part of it. As
Yeah.
much as I love Matt, we set that up pretty well, so we got to get to it.
Yeah, well, this is where you find out about the Band of the Red Hand,
Mm-hmm.
and I like, he does this. Jordan does this from time to time, and it's another one of those instances. I like that we never actually saw this because while it might have been fun to see these scenes from Matt's point of view and like a half chapter or a full chapter of him doing all this stuff, it's more impactful and exciting, I think, to hear it secondhand and to see how Matt, plays it off when other people are extolling his exploits. Um, and
Well,
then
yeah, especially since his exploits were him trying to run away again.
yes, uh, I kind of feel like that there's an interesting contrast that Rand doesn't seem to feel as bad about playing his friend the way he played these nobles because he knows Matt and
Mm-hmm.
he knows that like we said, he's got a good heart. He's going to complain about it, but he's going to jump out of the hayloft to rescue the damsel in distress. He's going to go running off in the rain, to rescue the girls, even though he knows that they're going to be ingrates and they kind of treat him like crap. And he's going to complain about it, but he's going to do it, and then he'll do it again if he has to. But you can't just ask him because that's not who he is. Um, and then we get to something that you kind of teased about talking about later, 863, when when Matt says that Morghese is dead, Rand felt as
Mm-hmm.
if his belly had been ripped out. Elaine, forgive me, and a faint echo altered. Aliena, forgive me.
Mm-hmm. which in the arguments for Elaine being Ilyena, one of the arguments against was Lews Therin never goes into his rants about Ilyena. But to me, this is an example of him doing it because he immediately thought of Elaine and then it went to the other. Not that I'm still convinced, but I think it is a piece of evidence against that one argument.
But Lews Therin's rants are often triggered by something that's happening in the present, triggering a similar thing that happened in the past. That makes him go bonkers. I think Avienda laid a hand on his shoulder, concern tightened her eyes. So, as I said at the beginning, you do get a very sharp change in their relationship that I think is done well.
Well, and of course, he internalizes the guilt from it, which is
he internalizes the guilt, which very quickly becomes a negative feedback loop because this is more than just knowing, Samael is Lord Brand and he's in charge of Ilion, and so the people of Ilion are going to be made to suffer for that. This is Elaine. He's understanding that Elaine was very close to her mother. She had a very good relationship with her mother, and somebody's going to have to break the news to her eventually. And it probably won't be able to be him because he doesn't even know where she is. So he won't be able to be there for her. And on top of that, he could have done something about it beforehand. He really couldn't have, objectively, intellectually speaking, that in the bigger picture, as you said, he's the dragon. He has to be a lot of things to a lot of people. And as much as he might have wanted to go deal with Ravine and rescue Morghese, if for no other reason than because of his love for Elaine, he really couldn't. There was just too much else going on, and it was too big a risk at that point. And now, as things unfold, he's seeing it as, well, now's the time. It'll be a raid. I'm not going to war with him. I'm going to go straight to the palace, and I'm just going to take him on while he thinks I'm busy with Karheen.
And then knowing what it means, Walrain steps right back in.
Yep.
All she says is one word, and because of everything that built up to that moment, she had the effect she needed.
Because she was able to cool his rage to take it from that, roaring fire to, bring it down, make it that, white hot flame, just with one word, as you say, because she had changed their relationship. And
well, flip back 6 pages. There are no poison needles in the seals and no traps woven. And now she is very circumspectly cautioning him to move forward.
Yeah.
Don't break the seal yet. Don't break the seal. Nothing's on accident.
So just to point out, because I've been wanting to point these things out as they kind of build, because it's still kind of new, is at the bottom of 865, Lews Therin's voice comes back, and it's an instance that happens from time to time where he's not raving. Did you think I meant to go alone? He had never thought of anyone to guard his back, though now he could hear a small whisper. He likes to come from behind or at your flanks. So what's going on in the present is influencing Lews Therin, and for whatever reason, focusing on Ravine and killing him has focused Lews Therin to where he's not raving, but his voice is still there, giving advice because he wants this as well. And then as they're leaving, again, the sharp contrast between and I think it's doubly sharp because Moraine told her why she changed the way she dealt with Rand.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember if it was this book or the previous book where Egwene says, "Why are you acting like this?" And Moraine tells her, "Because I remembered how you embraced Saidar. You surrendered to it." And she surrendered to who Rand was, more or less. She still has her narrow focus, but she understood that, you can't just tug him along
Mm-hmm.
and force him to go where you want. You did not try to talk me out of it, he said abruptly. He meant it for Moraine, but Egwene spoke first, though to Avienda and with a smile. Stopping a man for what he wants to do is like taking a sweet from a child. Sometimes you have to do it, but sometimes it just isn't worth the trouble. Avienda nodded. So again, she's being kind of childish and petulant.
Mm-hmm.
Moraine, on the other hand, says, the wheel weaves as the wheel wills.
Well, and also remember, to those that have read New Spring, Walrain was once like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a very strong character in the form of Land to help her develop as a person. And so she's got, in this case, I think it's around 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
20 years when she met the boys. So 21 years of additional experience to go with it. So maturity does play a role. And again, one of the disconnects with Egwene is you got to keep remembering, and it doesn't make you like it, that she's a girl. She's a 17-year-old girl at this point, assuming a year had gone by.
Yep. Any thoughts on the way Rand kind of switches from scheming to just, poking Matt in the chest and saying and having an intervention, basically. Shut up and listen, you have to stop running. I said shut up. Uh it's kind of harsh, but Rand is right,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's kind of a dick move, but it's also kind of a dick move on Matt's part to make him have to say it. Of,
Mm-hmm.
hey, remember that time where you were hanging from a tree and I literally saved your life? I literally resuscitated you because you had been hung from a freaking tree.
Well, and a lot of, I think this might be an important point going forward, and this kind of brought the words out. If we look at Rand's progression, we see a lot of screwing up along the way to get where he needs to go. And you brought up the maturation later, but realistically, he is a natural born leader.
Yeah.
His screwing up is when he overthinks things. And this is a good moment of where he's like, wait, just stop right now. This is what you need to do. And had he taken a moment to be like, well, but Matt's my friend and I can't do this to him. Those are the moments he screws up. When he reactionarily leads, he actually typically does the right thing.
That's a good point. That is a sharp contrast to where we started off with him being clever and scheming with the nobles in front of the palace.
Yeah, but scheming and rethinking yourself are two different things. He schemed reactionarily because, as you pointed out, when he realized what he was doing, he wanted to second guess himself, but it was already done.
but he had the girls stay because reflexively, because instinctively he knew they put Matt off balance, and
Mm-hmm.
I need him off balance because he's not going to want to do what he needs to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So yeah, it seems dickish, but sometimes a leader's got to be a dick.
mhm.
I'll say from experience, when I tried to smooth things over, when I had to make a hard decision as a boss, those were the worst decisions I made.
Yeah.
Whereas when I just said, you know what, where I would be maybe frustrated or whatever, and I'd go in and be like, do your freaking job. I have no time for it right now. That typically actually had great results.
Rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
I like that Moraine also kind of has a goodbye moment with Egwene, and it also kind of occurred to me that she has this kind of poignant moment, and Egwene is very emotional in the moment here when the fecal matter hits the rotating blades. But I don't know that she ever thinks about it later, or at least in none of the Egwene chapters that I can recall, does she think about Moraine and the lessons that she learned from Moraine. Rand is going to think about it a lot. Now, to an extent, he thinks about it too much because he with as with so many other things, piles that guilt on himself. You know, to a very unhealthy point. Um, but it is an interesting contrast that Egwene never really thinks about, you know, Moraine sacrificed herself for me. I was being killed. Moraine died to save me. I should have some gratitude there, and let me think about the lessons she was trying to teach me.
Mm-hmm.
Because she leaves her with some parting wisdom here. In much the same way that she left Rand with "you will do well." And wanting to make sure that he had that is kind of a goodbye, poignant moment. Um, and then we get something to keep in mind because it was said that if necessary, someone will close to him will die, and the tall hot blonde tries to stab Matt in the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Poor Matt. Um,
Well,
it,
again, we live in a world of fate, and he's still kind of digging his heels in with the finger in his chest,
mhm.
and this kind of takes his heels out of the dirt a little bit.
I really like the way this plays out, especially the end of it on 871. Groggily, he moved by instinct without thinking. The blade came out of his sleeve, left his hand as if floating through jelly. Only then did he realize what he had done and stretch out desperately, trying to snatch it back, knowing that she is a trained warrior who has been through a lot just since he's been with her. So he knows what she can do to a large extent. He doesn't care. The second he realizes what he did instinctively, he would rather have that blade back, knowing that she might end up killing him, that he might not be skilled enough to subdue her without taking a lethal blow,
Mm-hmm.
but he doesn't care. Uh, Even to the point of like getting on his knees, you know, next to her, giving her the opportunity to finish him off. And if he was in his right mind, he would have thought of that. But, he claims that, you know, ain't no woman gonna tie me down, but he kind of tied himself tightly to Melindra. And as
Mm-hmm.
much as he kind of grumbles in his head, you know, he is thinking, ah, crap, how am I going to tell Melindra that I have to go? Is she going to come with me? Is she going to want to come with me? Is this going to be a scene? I mean, I feel like Jordan's kind of showing us his inner monologue to let us know that even though he's grumbling and complaining as he does and says, "Oh boy, I hope she doesn't make a scene," I think Matt wants her to go with him, but is worried that she won't because she's tied to her society. She's tied to the maidens. So she's going to stay with the maidens guarding Rand when, while he's walking back to his quarters. I feel like what's really going on there is him trying to rationalize and prepare himself mentally for her to say, well, okay, I guess this is where we part ways, which he doesn't necessarily want, which makes it all the more of a kick in the nuts when he ends up having to kill her.
Mm-hmm.
Or I guess you could have just had him be married and kill his wife in the very first episode. That would have worked too.
You can't do to me
Oh,
what I do to you. You can't throw me off like that.
no, I'm just doing that to myself. I just it made me think of that. I still blame you for reminding me of it a couple episodes ago, but God, Jesus, so awful. It, again, the whole point of this reread specifically, besides just, we love these books, the reason it works. We have been with Matt and Melindra for a while now. We have seen them together. We have kind of seen their back and forth. And we have seen Matt and his roguishness for a while now. So it really freaking matters. It has an impact. This scene when he has to, you know, he doesn't understand what the hell, and it takes him a minute to realize she said the great lord. She
Mm-hmm.
said the great lord's own luck, and then it dawns on him what just happened.
Mm-hmm.
But he can't bring himself. It's still, it still cuts him deep. And the way the scene, like fades to black there of him sitting there just staring at her dead body, it matters because we've had a whole freaking book, almost 1,000 pages, building it up, and then several thousand before that just building Matt up by himself.
Well, which is funny because your beef with Avienda and Rand was the lack of buildup
Mm.
to their romance when we've got a whole book of buildup of romance to something that was inevitably semi-fake.
No, but that's why it's good. That's why it's so impactful,
Mm-hmm.
because we see this, and it's hard to remember what I was thinking at the time, but I suspect I was thinking that this was going to kind of be Matt's Avienda, that this the no woman going to tie me down has been tied down, and it's going to take someone you know as strong and strong-willed as a maiden to deal with Matt. And then holy crap, she just tried to kill him. Holy crap, she was a dark friend.
Well, let's Saki back. We got to Saki back to influences and training through these adults in their lives. Remember, the difference between this and a teen drama is the fact that these people are being nurtured by adults to become the great people that they are. And what happened in book 2, remember, Matt couldn't kill the dark friend woman, but Tom did over his shoulder in exactly the same way.
That's a good point. And Tom was a huge influence on Matt.
Yeah,
And
Matt did what he couldn't do in book 2.
even though he didn't want to do it, even though it was
Mm-hmm.
all instinct and he wished he could have taken it back, but
And
the
remember,
fact
he was angry
remains,
at Tom, even though he knew Tom
yes,
saved his life.
yes, but you don't kill a woman, by golly.
Mm-hmm.
It's crap. I just forgot who's that comedian. I think it's Bill Burr, who has a bit about, you know, this this stuff about you never hit. There's no reason to hit a woman. What are you talking about? I can think of 12 reasons off the top of my head. You just don't. And that was the frame of mind that Matt was in, of You just don't do that to a
Mm-hmm.
woman. It doesn't matter that she was about to kill me. You find another way. All right, so let's see how quick we can get through chapter 52, choices. And oh, look, why is there a crescent moon and stars for the icon for this chapter? Um, so a thought I don't think I've ever had before, and I'd be curious to go digging around in the in the nerdy forums, and surely someone else has done this before, but it would be very easy, and probably the obnoxious woke postmodernist uh faux intellectual hacks of today would say that this is robbing Lanfear of her agency because she's just a woman scorned. She's a woman. She's a human being. And I like that ultimately what sends her over the edge is as she starts screeching when she walks out of the wagon carrying his freaking skin, is you let another woman touch you. And that's what sends her over the edge, because the Forsaken are all people who let their passions, or one passion in particular, drive them.
Mm-hmm.
They are not especially well-rounded. They are slaves to something that so consumed them that they were willing to pledge themselves to some only partially understood dark entity. And in that way, and it would be interesting to think about the different Forsaken and their different personalities. The Forsaken are a lot like the Olympian gods. Is what made those Greek myths and stories so compelling was because the Olympian pantheon was so human.
Mm-hmm.
They were so emotional. They were driven by rage and jealousy and lust and glory and all these things, but like turned up to 11. Heightened, one particular thing heightened in a way.
Well, you see it in a lot of religiosity. Look at Dante's Inferno.
Mm.
We have embodiments of the seven deadly sins, right? And when you really look at the Forsaken, they're kind of embodiments of a similar kind of, you know, Asmodean was probably pride, I would guess.
Mhm.
You know, but Lanfear is definitely jealousy. Would be her prime motive. Even when it goes into her works in the Age of Legends, she was jealous of the other people that were in this school that she couldn't get into.
Mhm.
Uh, Now, Demandred would also be like a male version of that jealousy. So there's overlap with them, unlike maybe the movie Seven, which was great, where you had a manifestation of each of the deadly
Yeah,
sins.
very obvious of that particular sin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then you also have like Grendel, who would be lust, but it's lust in the truest sense that there is no emotion behind it. It's just the pure debauchery of it
Mhm.
and the power that it gives you.
Yeah. And
Well,
to
okay,
that.
so Demandred, okay, so jealousy was the wrong word. We interchanged that word. Envy.
Mm,
It would be Demandred, which is a type of jealousy,
yeah.
but it's not over your loved one. It's over your projection of your worth compared to other people.
And it's where there's a difference between Grendel and Lanfear, which we'll see more as we see more of Grendel, but it it her trophies had to be more than just beautiful people. They had to be special people. So they had to have
Mm-hmm.
status. Lanfear has that element too, but it's all wrapped up in Lews Therin.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more than just, you know, uh lustful infatuation. Uh he's the man.
Well, because
And therefore he's mine,
she
damn it.
attached the worth to it.
Yes.
Just like we talked about Rand internalizing his guilt, she internalized her worth to Lews Therin.
Hmm.
because he was supposedly the number one.
I, jealousy and the pride of I'm the greatest. I'm the greatest female channeler. He's the greatest male channeler. Obviously, we belong together.
And which is funny because we can go back to Shamal. He was the worst of the worst because he didn't actually embody any of those characteristics. He embodied knowledge.
Mm.
He was the great philosopher. He embodied the knowledge of what exactly existed on that other side of the bore. And that's a scary thing because
Yeah.
he didn't succumb to any of these things. He
No, there's kind of there's not kind of, there's definitely a Nietzschean element to Ishamael,
Mhm.
especially the more you see him later on. Of he stared into the abyss, and the abyss definitely stared back.
Yeah. Well, let's get through the action and then we can go
Okay.
into spoilers and continue
So,
that.
but the other thing that the other reason it works, besides, you know, making her so human, despite her, you know, almost demigod status when it comes to knowledge and power, especially in this world, it also makes it believable what happens here, that she is so obsessively focused on Rand, on Luz Theron, and uh, causing him pain because he made her feel pain, and she doesn't like that because that's weakness. And how dare you make me feel weak? That's just only going to heighten her psychopathy. Well, because she's so obsessively focused on it, Moraine is able to take her out. Um, in a way that is perfectly believable, as well as giving an incredible send off to Moraine. Yeah. Goes out like a champ.
Well, and that's one of the things about Lanfear that some people in the first read kind of miss is she is, even amongst the Forsaken, so powerful that you would have to wonder why she wasn't the top of the top to begin with. And realistically, her glaring weakness is so glaring that it makes her vulnerable to the nth degree. She was the most powerful with the power. She was one of the smartest. She was all of these things, but she wasn't Ishamael. But
Because
she also wasn't Luz Theron or Ileana or any of the
Ishamael was a true believer. The reason that she's so powerful but not the boss is because she's so powerful she wants to be the boss,
Mm.
not the second in command to the Dark One.
Well,
She
but
even
not only
says that a
that, I will
couple of
say,
times.
but because she's incapable of being the boss.
Yes.
Yeah.
She is her own person completely,
Yeah.
and that's the way it has to be, because of her pride and her jealousy. Um, do you have any other thoughts on that chapter? I know there's a lot that happens there, but it's a lot of good action, and to me, the meat of it is Lanfear and Moiraine. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the who Lanfear is what builds up to that moment, and then you know, building up Moiraine to see her sacrifice herself is what makes that all work. And then you know, right off at the beginning of the chapter, you know, as if that wasn't a good enough kick in the nuts, we get Lan and the resignation, or as it says, I know, Lan said hopelessly. You know, the emptiness there, that yeah, he knows she's gone, but he still kind of wants to dive in to certain death after her. Not
Mm-hmm.
kind of. He is compelled to dive into certain death after her. And it and um as he says when he takes off, that the only reason I'm not diving into certain death, the only reason I'm not going mad, is because she arranged to have my bond pass when she died.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we've talked about the mentor-mentee relationship a lot here. Uh, and I think this is one of the things that kind of sends Rand down a dark path is the way he parts with Lan, because he has such a strong relationship with him,
Hmm.
and they part on such a harsh note of so 897 is Lan's departure. The wheel weaves. Lan went to Mandar, busied himself checking the Black Stallion Saddlegirth. She was a soldier, a warrior in her way as much as I. This could have happened 200 times these past 20 years. She knew it, and so did I. It was a good day to die. Uh, and this has to hurt too. I am your friend, Rand, but I cannot stay. Tells him about the bond. Um, so he's compelled to seek her out. Um, but then his final words have and I feel at some level he has to know, but I think he does know, but he feels that, you know, he and Rand are kind of kindred spirits in this way, and this is who he is. This is what he truly believes is if you ever see Nynaeve again, tell her. For an instant, that stone face crumpled in anguish. An instant, then it was granite again. He muttered under his breath, but Bran heard, "A clean wound heals quickest and pain shortest." Aloud, he said, "Tell her I found someone else. Green sisters are sometimes as close to their warders as other women are to husbands, in every way. Tell her I've gone to be a Green sister's lover as well as her sword. These things happen. It has been a long time since I've seen her. I will tell her whatever you say, Lamb, but I don't know that she'll believe me. We are alike in many ways, you and I. There's a darkness in us. Darkness, pain, death. They radiate from us. If ever you love a woman, Rand, leave her and let her find another. It will be the best gift you can give her." That means a lot coming from Land. And that, um, that's where, the reread, the first reread or two really hammered home who Rand becomes in the next couple of books, in large part because of that. But there's a reason he doesn't fully commit. He doesn't fully become Lan, which we'll get into when we get there. Um, any thoughts on Moraine's letter? Um, there's a lot of good stuff there. And I like the way he gives us Moraine's final thoughts. Um, because it's a little bit cryptic. Uh, it's very much her. And you get a lot of it interspersed with some of Rand's thoughts. And then I love the kind of the bombshell he ends it on of, "Oh, hey, she knew who Jason Natil was the whole time,
Hmm.
but she understood that he's got to do what he's got to do." Um, and then comes the part with the maidens where it's important that he says this out loud, and Sulin understands, and it's useful that she takes a moment to sit down and explain to him, like he's her little brother, which is kind of how she treats him, that you basically she says, forget you're not one of us, and this is who I am. you know uh where you were raised may say that you have to protect me but that's not where I was raised. And you're, you know, you're infantilizing me if you don't let me put myself in danger because that's the life I've chosen.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but again, I I don't think it's an accident that this scene comes right after Rand was just sitting in this shack alone, kind of berating himself, trying to make himself cry because he felt guilty that he wasn't. He wanted to make himself feel something over Moraine, and he's self-flagellating. I mean, he's turned into a
Mm-hmm.
cutter. He's just not literally cutting himself. He's cutting himself deeply emotionally. And I think it's no accident that this comes in and completely inadvertently, completely justified in her mind, but Sulin comes in and really piles on top, just really drives the point home of, what Land just said, what he just thought in his own mind reading over Moraine's letter, and now just keep that in mind going forward of what that turns Rand into.
Well, and when we get to the spoilers, we're going to talk about the women. Sulin is giving an example of this with Rand's development. She says, I am the spear.
Yes.
And we hear that echoed later with Rand, where he refers to himself as the spear. I am no longer a person.
Mm-hmm.
I am an object that is to be used for this purpose, which is really easy to fall into, even in today's day and age. But if you believe in a world with fate, how easy is that to fall into?
Yeah.
Because if you believe truly in fate, fate as a driver, you are just a tool, because someone else's fate is locked. So everything you do in interaction with that other person is something that you had to do. So you are a tool at that point. And he starts to
Mm-hmm.
really go down that rabbit hole, which really sucks when you're in a world that believes 100% in a pattern and a fate.
Mm-hmm. All right. Do we want to go through the climax, or do we want to just talk about? Because I know you wanted to get to this because I think because this fight occurs in the world of dreams, and that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of a big deal.
Which I wish we would have got a little more information on Robin and Backdrop. Even with the cheat book, you don't get enough of it to know why in the hell he would make this strategic decision. Now, you get some of it from the memories from Lews Therin, that this is his personality. He wants to hit you from the flank and everything. But when confronted with the battle and the flank attack didn't work, he was also one of the most powerful,
Yeah.
physically and with the power. If this fight would have made sense if it was Asmodean.
Well, I think you do get enough as it goes along, and you get a little bit of Lews Therin's thoughts that of who Ravine is that much like, you know, on the other Forsaken, you know, he is a lot like Samuel in a lot of ways. And really all of the Forsaken, they're not going to take extreme risks. The for all of them, Asmodean lays it out directly that was all it was for him was immortality. Their immortality is a major, if not the component of why they went to the dark. So none of them are going to put themselves in a stand-up fight with Rand.
Mm-hmm.
So stepping into the world of dreams gives him another element where he feels like he has the advantage.
Yes, but I think he only fought with that extra little wrinkle. He never used both together. He never used his physical and power related force
Mm-hmm.
along with the other. Whereas we got it directly in contrast with just the end of a book ago, where Asmodean when backed into a corner, literally ended up in a wrestling match with Rand. And Asmodean would
Mm.
be someone about my size but skinnier, where Rand would be someone like Ken's size and pretty jacked. So
I I think there was an element of desperation because even though there is some arrogance there, Asmodean recognizes that in levels of power, he's behind Rand and most of the Forsaken. Whereas Ravine is arrogant in his power. And there's an example later on. I don't want to go into the details, but you'll probably know what I'm talking about, as will anyone who's read the series. There is a duel that happens, a one-on-one, an actual traditional duel that happens later in the series. And one of the combatants is someone who likes to bleed his opponents. So he likes to strike at the limbs and bleed you and wear you out before going in for the kill. And it's part tactics of when you go in for a killing blow, you sometimes expose yourself. So make sure you've weakened them first. But there's also an element of sadism and pride there, of enjoying dismantling your opponent before you kill them. I think that's part of, because I assume what you're talking about specifically is the fact that why is Ravine just kind of sitting there staring at Rand in that last, you know, World of Dreams trap, that kind of mini nightmare that he put him in. He's just kind of sitting there staring and smiling. Why didn't he attack with the one power there while Rand was pretty much incapacitated? And he
that,
could have finished him
yeah,
off.
that was part of it. It just seems so, I don't know. You adding the bleeding element kind of does give it a little bit to it, but at the
Mhm.
same time, it seems like he went into the world of dreams in desperation, but then he only fought with dreams. Whereas what we know about Robin's actual power is he could have created a
Well,
multi-front.
I assume the reason was for the same reason he gated into the world of dreams in the first place, is he used the power to physically go into the world of dreams, knowing that Rand would feel that, knowing that Rand would see that and then follow him. And now Rand doesn't know how to manipulate the world of dreams. So I can manipulate the world of dreams while he's flinging the power about, and I know where he is and he won't know where I am.
Well, that's part of it, but again, Rand won because he used both.
Yes.
Where Robin experienced in all of the ways only used one weapon when it came to that point. We brought up Bruce Lee earlier. I don't fear the man with the knife because he only thinks about the knife. And Robin only thought about the world of dreams. He could have easily world of dreams them and fireballed them at the same time. He is that skilled. Now, what we could have got, and this is where some mystery is good, but then too much mystery
Mhm.
makes things not make sense. Is maybe Robin is extremely powerful, but he's very specified. Like he uses compulsion, we know that. He uses compulsion like it's cocaine, right? But we never actually, other than his trap with the lightning bolt, see him use destructive magic. Maybe if we get a little hint from the Lews Therin memories or something, he sucked with this kind of thing. So that's why he did things from the circumspect type
Mhm.
of combat. So we could have gotten that because we see that in other situations, but we're speculating it. Whereas I think a little knowledge in that area would have made things make more sense. It just seemed like a very like you talk about things being contrived because we don't get enough insight on Ravin going into it. We get a slightly contrived ending here. Because again, the only reason Rand won is not because he was more skilled in the world of dreams. It was because he was willing to use all the weapons at his disposal.
I was looking for the specific text, but it's not in the prologue, I don't think. It's when Nynaeve, when Birgit takes Nynaeve to spy on them and they're talking about the plan. It I I don't know why I've never really considered this before, but he's part of this conspiracy,
Mm-hmm.
and the plan wasn't to kill Rand. The plan was to link together to subdue Rand and take him to the Dark One, because that was what the Dark One wanted. I think that's why he's toying with Rand, is he's waiting for his conspirators to join him so that they can execute the plan and shield him, capture him, take him to the Dark One to be forcibly turned.
Yeah, but I think also, if you're right on that, there should have been something there where either they arrived too late or he made a comment or something along the lines to put those two things together. And
Let's put a pin in
we
that because I don't think we can talk about that.
we just talked about the
Yeah,
meticulousness of Jordan, and then we get to something that I think wasn't meticulous enough.
maybe, but
And
we got to wait
and I
to
do think it's
spoilers to talk
the
about it.
flaw of him rushing to everything right at the end. When we get to the end of when everything comes together, it almost seems like
Well, all right. Well, something I can talk about before we get to spoilers is we do actually, though, see a mirror of this with Nynaeve and Malkidian, because Malkidian is so prideful, it never occurs to her that she has to fear Nynaeve in the world of dreams.
mhm.
But Nynaeve knows just enough, and she's so freaking strong-willed that when she envisions that uh Adam on her uh on her wrist, Malkidian can't make it go away
Mhm.
because Nynaeve is so strong-willed. Yes, she doesn't know all the tricks. She doesn't know. I mean, Malkidian probably knows, the quantum physics of how the world of dreams works from being from the Age of Legends. But Nynaeve knows enough, and
Well, and
Malkidian isn't respectful of that.
from what I understand though is that it was the surprise that got her. Once the Adam was there,
Yeah.
she's no longer a master of her own thoughts. She is
And
subject to the will of Nynaeve's thoughts, which means she can't outwill it.
and because she's so shocked initially, she doesn't have time to fight World of Dreams style.
Mm-hmm.
And by then, as you say, it's too late because Nynaeve's in
Mm-hmm.
control.
Uh, but even then, that offered another avenue of explaining the plan. Because Moghedian was there because she's spying on Robin, she's spying on everything, and Nynaeve finds her there.
Okay. Well,
Okay, so let's just do the nuts and bolts.
all
Since
right.
anybody who's following along now has finished
Yep.
this book, so of course, Rand zaps Robin with Balefire, which is why Matt and Asmodean are still alive.
And
Uh,
and Nynaeve is gets a really harsh dig on Malkidian when she said, lets her know, yeah, I've figured out who you are, and I'll be seeing you in the waking world. So long, have fun,
yeah,
enjoy that. Um, and then of course, Asmodean goes looking for some wine, and then death took him.
yeah,
Uh,
which
which
apparently is not a pun.
in fact, Jordan was kind of offended that someone would ask that. Dear gosh, no. And then we get the little blurb of Morgase, and we see, we saw her sneaking out, and now we see where she's ended up. Um, and she's going to Amadisia, and then it leaves us there. All right. So, spoiler alert, big time spoiler alert. Go away if you haven't read this yet, because we're going to talk about who killed Asmodean.
Yes, there's that. I wanted to talk about Avienda and the three girls.
Okay.
We have to point out that there were a lot of people talking about it, but it was obvious from the beginning. Robin is not going to be able to come back because he was bail fired. Uh, And further evidence is not just what happened, it's the fact that Matt and Asmodean are alive. You know he was balefire. There's no other way he could have died and that happened.
Yes.
Now, spoiler alert, Jordan has stated in the theory land that Matt's dying and living again was not being hung. It was
Mhm.
this moment here when he was
Yes.
killed by the
When
lightning.
he was dead. There
Now,
was no
now
resuscitating there.
my little beef with that is the other one actually had more impact.
Mhm.
This one realistically was like, call it a mulligan.
You can certainly see why it was a point of confusion
Yeah.
until he clarified, because it could be either one.
Mm-hmm. Could be either one, but again, the other one was more impactful. All this other stuff happened after he was hung, whereas died and lived again here. Well, we just are like, okay, Matt's still alive. Cool.
Yeah. Um, Matt's still alive. Avina's still alive. Poor Pevin, he's dead. The the commoner who's carrying the banner, and the first look of any emotion on his face, and it's yeah, he's dead.
Now, how did he die? It wasn't the lightning then. What was?
No, it's then he got a Trolloc spear through the chest
Oh yeah,
while they
yeah.
were while they were fighting after they'd been revived or rebooted, reloaded. So somebody hit power word reload and loaded a save game.
All right. So that concludes book 5. We'll get into spoilers then.
Mhm.
Uh, book 5, I'll agree, was better after analyzing it on the reread.
Mhm.
Uh, you want to go? You do the Asmodean first because I think it's the
Okay.
shortest spoiler.
I don't think so, because not necessarily, because it ties into what you were talking about with Ravine. Is it is there? It's just so subtle, and this is where you know Jordan was a troll, but also where he kind of had his own kind of blind side sometimes, because you know uh I've mentioned this when we talk politics, is I have to think through a lot of times, because I'll sometimes just spout something out politically or philosophically, and it's more than just that sentence, or just that sentiment that's built on years and years of studying this stuff, that's built on days or weeks of reading about this or that subject. But if it's somebody who's not into that, they have a totally different frame of reference. Well, for anyone who isn't super duper nerdy and having followed this along, one of the things that made the who killed Asmodean theory go for so long is Jordan said himself he got to where he was enjoying it. He was
Mhm.
enjoying the argument. He was enjoying toying with the fans and not letting them know. But it's also because it kind of, even before that point where he just started to turn into a troll, he didn't answer the question, because, as he put it should be intuitively obvious to the most casual observer, I believe is the exact quote that was
Which
attributed.
it wasn't. It took you telling me who it was.
Yeah. And now I
And
eventually,
even in the big cheat book, it doesn't tell you where you learned this. It tells you who
yes,
killed him, but it
yes.
doesn't tell you where you learned it.
Now I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it was before he died, so it would have been around the time one of the last couple of books that he put out came through, and it was someone who had written up the evidence for this and cited the passages, and where he had gotten this is so the guy who wrote this said that he's at this point he'd reread the series 2 or 3 times, and he'd argued with people on the forums over this issue, and when he finally convinced his girlfriend to read the series, he rather snarkily said, "Okay, well, who killed Asmodean?" And she said, Well, isn't it obvious? It's Grendel.
Hmm.
And he went, what? What do you mean, isn't it obvious? And she laid it out because for whatever reason, she had just seen it. So maybe she was a physicist too. I don't know, but her brain was on the same wavelength as Jordan, and it is all there. All right, it's not this bad, but as an analogy, after the awful end of Game of Thrones, there were people out there justifying it by saying, well, look at when she did this, like when she crucified all those people, and or when she reflexively like lit those people on fire. And okay, well, yes, all of those elements were there, but you had to look really hard, and it only worked in hindsight to say, okay, well, yeah, you can justify her going insane and burning the whole city down. It doesn't work in the moment. It's really hard to see this in the moment
Hmm.
of all of this that is happening. And that's why I kept hinting at what we saw in the prologue there with that little conspiracy of the Forsaken. Um, but there's 2 points that it really
Well, just funny
hinges
you
on.
brought that up because I thought her burning the whole city was obviously coming.
Oh, I thought it was obviously
Because of those
coming.
moments that you're talking about. I was like, I could
Oh,
see
really?
her turning into a bad person as the series went on. I thought it ended abruptly and with bad
Hmm.
poor logistics. Again, the armies reappearing and all of these stupid things, and really just rushed at the end. I thought that was all bad, but the Targaryen turning from who was supposed to be a heroine to a very, very, very not good person by the end, I thought they did that well.
See, I didn't think they did it well for what you just said. It was all rushed. I saw it coming from like the episode before, just because what's his face, your
Oh
avatar,
no,
he drinks and he knows
you
things.
could see
That
she's a tyrant before she leaves the island.
okay, but here's where I think it was messed up is, yes, you could see all of those moments, but after every one of those moments, there was kind of a learning moment. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't want it to turn out this
Well,
way.
except there was a learning
I'm
moment and she did it more the next time. She did it
Yeah,
more, bigger, better the next
yeah.
time. So I mean, yeah, you could see she was an embodiment of, like Lenin at that point going
But
forward.
then, as you say, it's rushed in the end. So you
Mhm.
have all these things building up.
Well,
You've
it's
got this
inconsistent at the end, I will
you,
say.
you've got this conspiracy that Ravine is part of, and
Mhm.
he's putting all these little breadcrumbs. I was trying to point them out without pointing out what I was pointing out as we went
Mhm.
along here. And then all of a sudden Ravine's dead, and then all of a sudden Asmodean's dead. And you're like, what just happened?
Well, and I understand the want for mystery, but then I think that leads into a need for post hoc uh information,
Mhm.
like another meeting with the ones that survive that say, well, that didn't go as planned because he did this, or something along those lines. We talk about showing not telling, but sometimes you need to tell, especially when it's in written format, and especially when you don't want to show too much before something happens.
Especially in that book, since the whole point of it is to be a glossary, an encyclopedia, an explanation,
Mm-hmm.
an out of character, out of world explanation
Yeah, and
to clarify
you could have
things.
had any number of characters do this. You could have Moghedian talking to Nynaeve and them because of her spying. You could have had
Well, that's
a
what I've got here.
you
That's what I was
could
flipping through.
you could have had a frustrated Samael because his part in the plan was, remember, the scapegoat. Well, the scapegoat is all of a sudden a vulnerable entity when one of the conspirators that was supposed to attack from the flank is all of a sudden dead. And
Page 929.
929. Okay.
Okay. So this is one of the two key elements I mentioned for the theory that made me go, holy crap. That's the theory that makes the most sense that I've ever seen. And that's when I became convinced that, yeah, Grendel killed him. Now this is the stronger of the two pieces of evidence. So 929. Uh, Malkadian's trying to bargain. Lanfear says, "Tell me, and I'll." Or Nynaeve says, "Tell me, and I'll decide if it's worth keeping you alive." Lanfear, Grendel, Ravine, and Samuel are plotting together. Nynaeve gave the lease a short tug, staggering her. "I know that. Tell me something new." The woman was captive here, but the Adam only existed so long as they were in Teleron Riyadh. "Do you know they are drawing Rand al'Thor to attack Samael?" "Yes, we all knew that, and Nynaeve kind of knew it too from the spying on them. But when he does, he will find the others as well, waiting to trap him between them." And so this was what I was looking for to your point on Ravine, is this reinforces that the plan is some form of the plan is still in action, because Ravine is pulling him into a trap. He's not going for the kill, which was the plan. So far as
Yeah,
we know, at least
no,
the
I read this another way though.
mm,
That the plan was for Rand to attack Samael,
yes,
and then Ravine and Grendel would be there. But Ravine being being the bait in the trap was never part of it. So there
yes.
would be no reason for him to wait there for others unless he had a way of communicating with
Ah,
them.
but yes. Uh, at least you will find Grendel and Ravine. I think Lanfear plays another game. Of course, she's always playing another game. But it is important to note that so far as I think we all know, the don't kill him order is still in effect.
Mhm.
From the Dark One is, he needs to be captured, he needs to be turned, don't kill him or I'll be mad at you. Um,
But then Ravine is smart enough. He was
mhm.
the ultimate diplomat, remember? Even more so than Lews Therin or any of the others. To me, that character development that we learned about that would be count as losses and run at that point,
Mhm.
not
All right.
sit there and just watch.
All right. Well, here's where it goes on. That is Malkadian murmured if he lives long enough to find them. And then Nynaeve gets really scary and threatens her. And words spilled from Malkadian's mouth, and her tongue flickered out to wet her lips continually. "al'Thor means to go after Ravine today, this morning, because he thinks Ravine killed Morgase." All right. If Malkavian knows that, then there's every bit the chance that the others know that. And by the fact that Ravine set up an ambush with the wall and all the Trollocs behind it and the lightning trap, yeah, Ravine knew that Rand was coming after him. So it's entirely conceivable that the conspiracy plan was modified knowing that Rand was going after Ravine, not Samael.
Well, except she goes on to say things that would take away from your theory that he wanted him alive. Because if you say if he lives through, and then she goes on to say that Ravi never trusted any of them, so he set his own traps. So if he lives through, implies that Ravine intends to kill him if he doesn't take the original bait. I mean,
Well,
if he comes after him.
I think it's just as likely that that's just Malkavian trying to bait Nynaeve and get under her skin.
Of course, he also did set the lightning trap, so he did intend to kill him there.
Conceivably.
I mean, you don't shoot lightning at somebody unless you're planning on killing them.
Under normal circumstances, yes, but when you're attacking somebody who has the power to deflect that lightning,
Yeah, but okay, so you're saying he technically could deflect this, but he might not. So he could die or not die. That's
well, I think it may have been Samuel, not Ravine, who does this, but one of them either says or thinks something along the lines of, you know, hey, if he accidentally gets killed while I'm trying to defend myself, I didn't technically break the Dark One's orders. It just is what it is. So I think it's a heads I win, tails you lose situation of, if I kill you, good, I don't have to worry about you anymore. If I don't, then I've weakened you, which will help me trap you and take you to the Dark One. All right. Now I can't remember exactly which page the other one is in, but the other point of evidence for this theory is that, and this one's kind of tenuous. When Rand is running down the hall before he goes into the dream world, when he's running down the hall trying to find Ravine, he comes across two servants, right? Remember the
Mhm.
scene? Except he thinks the very next day he's thinking about how, or it may have been Asmodean when he's looking for wine, there are no servants. They've all fled the palace. In fact, almost everyone fled the palace because Ravine filled it with Trollocs. So who were those two servants? Because there are no servants. They've all fled the palace. So the thinking is, well, that was Samael and Grendel in disguise because we know they can do that. And Rand doesn't know how to detect that. They know, we know as readers that the Forsaken, the knowledge from the Age of Legends gives them the ability to weave disguises around themselves as well as hide their ability to channel.
Yeah, but the weave itself would still register.
No, there's a way to invert it and make it invisible.
Hmm.
And we saw that, and this is one of those little nuggets that I didn't notice until I'd reread a few times, is uh Jordan actually shows us that in this book, because that's what Asmodean does to hide the gateway that Rand had blocked when he went running after Avienda.
Oh yeah, because the gateway was made by Avienda, so he had to hide the female weaving.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Interesting. But even still, if Grendel and Sal were there, why did they not proceed with the plan?
Now that part I don't have an explanation for.
Because that
Uh
part would make no sense, because the one who knows all in their lives would actually have come down on them hard for not completing the plan there.
the only, I can't remember what, the people who put this theory out there, I don't remember what their explanations for it was. My thought is that, um remember, Rand has a an Ungreal. He's got the little fat man. So he is going nuts. He's ripping the palace apart, and he's really scary. And where the hell is Lanfear? So they're a person short. And what game is Ravine playing? Because not only are they having to dodge Rand, but they're having to dodge Ravine's traps that are being triggered by all this channeling. So
But
my
even
thought is,
still, post hoc knowledge would have been the the cure for the speculation.
yes, and
You know?
and we'll have to keep an eye out if there's any, if there are any hints, because that is one of the annoying things about the fact that Jordan started to enjoy the debate and the consternation, and the fact that
Yeah.
every single time he ever went to a signing or a convention, and there was a Q&A, someone would inevitably ask him that question.
Yeah.
And he got to where he kind of enjoyed saying, read and
Yeah.
find out.
Well, the problem is, if you give the answer of read and find out, you need to eventually have something for people to
Yeah.
read.
Well,
And whether that was a Sanderson failure later and there was something intended to read or not, we need somebody to come out with, hey, I've looked at the notes and yes, this should have been in there, or something along those lines. But
yeah.
yeah, show and not tell is great until you want to surprise people. Then you need
Mm-hmm.
something that
Well,
brings it back later.
and this is where I think, maybe he got a little obstinate, is the fact that he thought it was so obvious, and yet it was the major point of contention for almost the whole run of the series in the fan community. I think maybe that was a little bit of a hit to his professional pride. Is, what do you mean you can't figure it out? I put all the hints there. And if you say, yeah, well, nobody saw it, then you're saying you didn't write it as well as you think you did.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there may have been a point of professional pride there of just kind of stubbornly digging in his heels and saying, no, I gave you the hints, you figure it out.
Yeah, but then again, someone like Sanderson could have come in later and who lacks the pride attached to it and had access to writing the last three books.
And it is in there, and we'll get to that when we get to that, but it's kind of oblique. And I think maybe the only reason I saw it is because I had already become convinced that Grendel was who killed him. And so if you read the particular scene I'm thinking about way down the line, I don't remember exactly which book it's in. I think it may be the second one that Sanderson wrote. So
Well,
second to the last
admittedly,
book.
and I'm going to have to reread those before we finish this because the Sanderson books I have only read once.
Yeah.
In
Yeah, I
fact,
remember
because
you saying that.
I had stopped reading when Jordan passed, and then I decided to do the full reread of the first like seven, and then re one time read the next ones after that, and then one time through the Sanderson books.
Mhm.
So it was so admittedly I'd have to reread those, which sucks because I really wasn't into the first Sanderson one.
That one was the roughest to get through because there's a lot that happens there, and a lot of it is Matt. And as he said, that was the hardest one for him to
Yeah, and
write.
he
And
admits it took him till the second book he wrote to even kind of get it right in
yeah,
the
and it's a lot of very important Matt stuff because of how much had been set up in the previous two books. It's holy crap, this storyline has come to culmination, and now what's happening, and now it's this is weird.
uh let's get on to
Well,
the girls though.
the girls, yeah, that was the other spoiler thing that was something you wanted to
Yeah.
get into.
Okay, so I've just got my own notes here because I went through a lot of message boards
Mhm.
just with is the search term of is Elaine Ilyena. And there's a lot of you want to talk politics and how angry people get. This is a contentious one. So, Scott, if we make you angry, we're not trying to trigger you. I'm not convinced Elaine is Ilyena. And one of my biggest beefs is everybody talks about the hair. And I'm like, well, then Birgit's Ilyena. Then, all of these other, lots of blondes in this world, Uh, but you add that to the importance of Rand's life and everything. So a lot of message boards later where people are fighting over those two things, that the fact that she has to be because she's Rand's lover and she looks like her and she's
Mhm.
strong in the power and all of those standard arguments versus that really doesn't mean anything because it really doesn't. Then you get into the hoax, which was based on something apparently Jordan had said in real life that souls can be split. And then apparently this group of people decided to make a hoax post when the internet was early in the internet era, that they actually met with Jordan and had dinner with him, and he gave a lot of insights. And their thing that came out of that was Ilyena was Min, Avienda, and Elaine all together. Well, apparently that was a hoax. And it was later said that no, that's not what I meant. That's not the case. So that was interesting until I got to the bottom of that one. But there are people that still hold to that because apparently they didn't read the post by the original hoaxers that said we did this. We made this up. In fact, we never met with Robert Jordan. But then there was one intriguing theory that I had out that was put out there, was that they're all manifestations of Rand's lovers in different ages. And Elaine is Ilyena because she represents the Age of Legends. And Avienda is the current. She's not a reborn. She's the current because the Aiel in this manifestation are the manifestation in the current age of that whole thing. And Min, because she's the every girl, is what is theorized as what we're living through right now, which was the age before the Age of Legends. because she's the one you can most identify with as a person living in this day and age. And so that was an interesting theory, except I kind of invert it, because Avienda is representative of a regression of the IEO. And I think Min, because she's the forward thinking philosopher, is the manifestation of the third age. But I can go a lot of ways on that. I could go to the original thought, or I could go to what I just said. Because Min also being the forward thinking philosopher, well, the next age would be the recycling of the first age. And so she could be first age thinker, but it just happens in the third age. So going back around to the first. And so those are the theories on that. I mean, there is no evidence one way or the other. So if you want to say Elaine's Ileana, I can't refute it. This
Yeah.
is like arguing religion, because I can't give
Well,
you evidence.
yeah, it's also just as likely that what triggers Luce Theron isn't that Elaine is directly Ileana. It's just that there's that emotional connection. So he is Rand's Ileana, which, so when Rand feels those emotions, Luce Theron feels those emotions, and it triggers his ravings.
Mm-hmm. Well, but and the argument against is he never gets that trigger when he's looking at her, which he does get a Demandred trigger when he's looking at Tane, which for those that have read all the way through know that he's not Demandred, but there is the resemblance there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not only resemblance in looks, but resemblance in character and actions.
Yeah, yeah. There's I feel like Luce Theron is somehow picking up a subconscious subliminal knowledge that there's a connection there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, he was one of the most influential people of his time. He would have these kind of people skills to read not only just people in general, but your competition.
Yeah.
If he'd only done it better, he never would have dated Lanfear,
Well, she's hot.
I mean, she's got things that make you drop your guard.
And she's very good at what she does.
Mm-hmm.
When she wants something, she's very good at getting it. So, you got to figure that was we don't get told a lot, but you get the hint that this was like a college romance, and then he grew up and moved on, and she didn't.
Mm-hmm. Well, and just taking the former life of somebody. So a lot of people try to do this because of Birgitte and Geidel Kane. They're always connected. So they're trying to use that as an assumption that everybody reborn is always connected. And that's a weak assumption. That's actually a very fallacious assumption. But if you use that assumption, then yes, you would say Elaine is probably. But then the monkey wrench, the cog in the cog there is the fact that there's two others, which was explained by the hoax that they're all a manifestation of this person. Well, that turned out to be a hoax. So now there's still this wrench in the cog that says, well, if this is this person that's reborn and everybody's connected, who were the other two in Luce Theron's past life?
Yeah, and
he can't be Lanfear, who's the other person he dated, because she's still alive.
Remember the scene in the Matrix where what's his face? That turns out to be the traitor is sitting there looking, and he says, "Yeah, I don't see the numbers anymore. I just see blonde, brunette, redhead."
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Jordan's just a horny old man, and he wanted to get it with a blonde, a brunette, and a redhead, because physically that's what they are. They each represent that, but they also represent personalities. They represent different themes.
Mm-hmm.
But
the spoiler part of this is the fact that is what they represent.
Yeah.
Because Avienda does represent the fact that he is a spear. She represents his honor. Elaine represents the part that he did, the Dice de Mar, the politics, this face he has to wear. The face he has to wear as the warrior. The face he has to wear as the politician. And Min, this is the spoiler part, because she represents She's the every woman. She's the person who grounds him in the end, realistically.
That's a good point because he thinks about before she pops back up. He has thought on several different occasions that uh Min never made him feel like this. He
Mhm.
could feel like himself with Min. Min is who he is behind closed doors.
She's his
Min is the
humanity.
true self.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's his humanity. Where we got the spear, we got the leader, she's the person.
Mhm. The other thing I was going to say on themes is that Jordan kind of addressed this a number of times, is that, and I've mentioned this before, is that not every thread was going to be tied in a bow by the end of the series. He purposely was going to leave certain things unknown or only hinted at because life isn't neat. So yes, there are connections. There are, it is a weave. The whole illustration and metaphor of the weave of life, of the different lives coming together to form this tapestry. But sometimes stuff just happens. So it's not completely connected. It's not completely neat. There are times where, no, that's just a guy. No, that's just a girl. No, that's just a thing that happened.
Yeah, but I
So
think interplay with your main characters is different than that's just a guy, though.
true.
You know,
But but I think it's more than enough to your point of these are three aspects of Rand's character that need to be complemented and reinforced for him to be who he has to be.
mhm. Well, and again, I'm going to bring Perrin back into it. We have a complementary force to his nature, but he is very simplistic compared to what Rand has to be.
Yeah.
Uh, and even Matt, eventually we get a complementary force to his character. Now, I
Mhm.
still think because of Sanderson's clunkiness, that doesn't work out the way it's supposed
No.
to. But at the same time, I see where Jordan wanted to go there, and I
Yeah.
approve of that message. But if you don't see that, then you just kind of are like, okay, why her? Oh, then it seems contrived because then it just seems like a tool to get her army.
Yeah. Yeah. Rather than really, it's they're both influencing each other.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see it as she kind of softens, he kind of gets more direction, and you can see where that might have gone if we get the couple more books I think we were supposed to have, or if we got those Outrigger tales that Jordan had
Mm-hmm.
in mind.
Well, and this might be part of the outrigger, but there's a lot of those secondary characters that don't get wrapped up, but don't even get addressed again. That would be completely sabotaged by the way things worked out. Like Besling, remember him? Tylen's son
Mhm.
doing his thing, coming up with his resistance to the Shanshin in Ibu Dar and
Mhm.
all of these things that we're building that actually Jordan spent a lot of time to build up. And then it just went away. And Matt becoming the part doing what he did could reinforce that, or it could make him kill
No,
Beslan.
that's where you need to go back and reread the Sanderson books because that's actually addressed.
Is it addressed?
Yeah.
Okay.
It happens fairly quickly. It's not a long scene, but yeah, it is actually addressed, and it's it's uh it is a good scene because it's not a Matt thing. It's used. He spends all that time building it up in the presence of Matt, and then he kind of turns it on its head because he uses all of that as a Tawan scene.
Okay. So I will have to reread that
It's
one.
it, it it's a scene to explore her and explain her character.
The problem is I think I'm gonna have to start rereading earlier
Mhm.
because as we go forward through Lord of Chaos, I read many times. In fact, when I was rereading it the last time, I was like, I was having the thoughts of, should I skip ahead because I know what's happening here? Even though I decided to just keep reading, but probably about book 9, but 8 or 9, it was almost like I was reading it for the first time again on some of the places. So
Up through Winter's Heart is what I know the best because those are the ones I reread the most.
mhm.
Because Crossroads of Twilight was a little disappointing to me. I actually went back and reread Knife of Dreams, uh, like sometime after I'd read it before, just by itself because I liked it so much. I think that was after his death that I was crap. And after his death, I went back and reread Knife of Dreams because that was the last one he did, or the last one he was ever going to do.
Well, and there was a moment there where it looked like he was trying to wrap it up and then realized he couldn't.
Hmm.
And so that might be why some of it felt rushed. And it might have actually given a little bit of a hamstring to Sanderson coming in to finish it, because then he's like, well, I can do it as long as I need. But he did all of this. So now I've got to wrap this up, wrap this up, wrap this up,
Yeah,
wrap
the
this up.
Crossroads especially felt like that because I think that was um he had found out he was sick.
Yeah. Well, and
By
this is one of
while
those
he was
things
doing
you can't be
Crossroads.
too critical, because it's everybody raise your hand who's been told they're going to die, and you've got this thing you've been putting your life into for.
And as I understand it, the way amyloidosis kind of drains you and drags you down, but it's not like well, you have stage 4 cancer, so you've only got a couple months. With amyloidosis, it's a kind of it's a coming.
Mm-hmm.
Not exactly sure when though.
All right, any other spoilers?
No, that's all I have. I can't wait to get to Lord of Chaos. It's a lot of these threads we've kind of been pointing out is they really get shined on in the next book.
I've got a fun reason for getting the Lord of Chaos, because our most prolific commenter, Scott, hates Gawain. And we get a nice full
Oh
dose of
man.
Egwene and Gawain in Lord of
Uh
Chaos. And it is actually the turning point of when they become really annoying characters, both of them. Uh and part of it is because they play on each other to become that way.
yeah, that's
So
a good point. That's a,
so there's going to be plenty of moments, and we look forward to the rants. Do we have any comments?
I was just looking that up.
I saw that there were 2, but I haven't read them yet.
Come on. Okay. So yeah, the as I said, this is why I don't like your medieval European history. The intermarriage hurts my brain. So Elaine is not distantly related to Moraine, which is what I'd said. Um, although I don't know exactly how this relationship. Anyway, Elaine's father is Moraine's uncle, as was Layman, the previous king, the one who cut down the tree.
Mm-hmm.
Um, wait, what would that make
Yeah,
them?
that's what I thought. I just couldn't give the names to it.
Okay.
Thanks, Scott. I think Asmodean would need compulsion to. I don't think Asmodean would need compulsion to spur Couladin. No, I don't think he needed it. But like we talked about, to change the
Yeah.
memories, I think it makes it it's very powerful when a true believer actually believes the lie.
Hmm.
As if it was something he in this case he had lived. And if you can give him a memory of going to Rydian and then attach the dragons to him, then it becomes kind of like a DMT trip. It's something that's real in your mind,
Yeah.
even though it didn't
He
actually happen.
he's not using compulsion to say, "Hey, cool it and go do this thing," because he
Yeah,
needs
no,
no
no. He
urging.
got a willing subject, which makes compulsion easier, because
Yeah.
we have Mohidian explaining compulsion to Leandrin, remember, earlier in this book. So it actually made it just an easy task to make him as fervent as he needs him to be, but not only as fervent as he needs him to be, but to take away any poker face ticks he could have when communicating to everybody else. So,
Hmm.
because we need Couladin to talk to these groups that haven't made a decision yet. And realistically, it's the pushing of the pace that kept that from happening. Rand pushing his people to move forward, to stay ahead of things. And Couladin, if he had known in his own mind that it was a lie, even if he wants to self-talk himself into delusion, would have given away the lie speaking to others. And someone as savvy as Asmodean would have known that.
You know, a good reinforcement to that is Savannah, because when we see her later on, she's very savvy. I mean, she's disgustingly cunning. And Jordan makes it clear she doesn't know what's happening here. And there's a moment there where she realizes, oh, he's right, you're wrong, you didn't tell me that. She was blindsided. And I
Mhm.
think if there had been, to your point, any sort of a poker face hint there, she would have picked up on it.
Mhm.
But he was so convicted. He was so certain. And I think there's a good chance that
It was delusion ramped to 11. And
I
and
kind
to
of think,
me, that could be the sense that the person who gave him the physical things gave him the internal illusion to contribute
yeah.
to his delusion.
And I hadn't really thought about that before, but um as radical Aiel psychopath that Couladin was, I don't think Asmodean could have just gone up to him and said, "Hey, you want to be the Karkarn? I can give you the markings." Is he really going to take
Well,
that from this wetlander?
especially since we've got comments from other Aiel that Couladin was actually an honorable Aiel. You took great honor in killing him. It
Mhm.
would have been more so if you took him captive. So he had a reputation for honor. He was driven a little batshit because of his brother's death and because of
Mhm.
he was actually driven batshit because he was privy to the illusion before he got the new markings. So he was at a precipice to say, please tell me this is wrong.
That's a good point, because where he goes psycho really is when
His brother doesn't come back.
how could this wetlander, not only how could this wetlander come out and my brother couldn't, but now this wetlander who I'm convinced killed my brother, he's the Karkarn? So he just had his world upended in a
And
big
he was
way.
looking for an explanation. And if you can provide a
Yeah.
memory with that explanation, yeah, it could have been done without it.
Yeah.
But also you could have tattooed the markings on without going without the power as well. Asmodean took a lot of shortcuts in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Why not take one here? And we know he was strong in compulsion. He was horrible in healing. He was horrible in all these things, but he was strong
I
in the
I
mental arts.
I think the elements are all there in Shadow Rising and Fires of Heaven to make that a logical deduction. And I think it's one of
Mm-hmm.
those interesting things that if he intended it, if that was in his notes or in his head when he wrote it, I like that he didn't say it specifically. And
Yeah, this is
again,
one of
it's
those untied loose ends, but at the same
yeah.
time, yeah, I agree with the statement he didn't need it. But at the same time, we look at the character of who's involved.
Mhm.
There was a lot of things that didn't need, but they were convenient and they were expedient. And
Yes.
they made it a more believable tale even going forward.
The reason, again, the reason it works and the show did it, and so much of modern writing is garbage, is because you don't need to come up with this theory to explain. It's just something that enhances, and all the elements are there. We don't have to make up our own headcanon. We know how compulsion works. We know kind of who Asmodean was and how he liked to operate. We know Couladin and what his mentality was, and we kind of saw the breaking point there. All these elements are there in the story, and we can then put them together to enhance our understanding and enjoyment of the story. We don't need it to explain it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a good place to stop. You got a hard stop here in a minute,
Yep.
anyways. All right. Well, we'll be back on Thursday-ish
Yeah,
with our
I don't think I'm
social
gonna.
talk. And I actually wanted to talk some social media stuff with some of the things we just talked about here, actually, on your poker face versus what you actually say out loud, and some of the self-validation that's coming through social media. Actually, that's very interconnected, and
Mhm.
that would be an interesting topic to explore. And we'll have results from the elections today, so that's always going to be something to talk about.
Yeah, I suppose I should start paying attention to that at some point today.
I didn't, because of all the talk about late counting and stuff, I didn't want to get too into it till at least this evening.
Yep, yep, yep.
But yeah, keep commenting, Scott. And I saw we actually had 2 more subscribers on, so does it should give me a name. Hold on. No, it doesn't say so and so subscribed. Usually we get a notification.
All right. Well,
But there are 2 new ones there. So if you're one of them, introduce yourself.
thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. And like, share, subscribe. These are awesome books. And we want to, we're on book 6 coming out of what,
Yeah.
14?
Hmm.
Uh,
I have heard that there were people who were turned off by the, and I know we had some comments when we were talking about the show, reviewing the episodes of the show that, I hadn't read them yet. Um, I hope that the show, because I have heard that there are anecdotally people who were so turned off by the Wheel of Time, by the show, don't let that happen. So if you by chance were in that camp, I hope that we have inspired you to pick up and read along with us, because it's certainly worth your time.
Great way to end. We'll see y'all next time. For those that follow the social stuff, Thursday or Friday morning, depending on how long it takes to upload.
See you.